clear all the debris. Perhaps they would say every 10 to 50 years to do a ground level burn off to clear the debris on the ground. But last 30 years, this is they've ceased doing it in a lot of places. Part of the reason is sorry?
You said what in the past 30 years? This what?
Past 30 years, the amount of burn-offs that they used to traditionally do have been cut down. One of the reasons is...
Are you talking about California?
Well, it seems to be both Australia and California. Anyway, California is full of eucalypts from Australia. They claim that's one of the reasons why it has such bad forest fires in California. The eucalyptus is a well. The eucalyptus is a eucalyptus tree. It's a lot of oil in it. Very oily tree, burns nicely.
Oh, so they have eucalyptus in California?
Yeah, I believe their eucalyptus has been taken to a lot of places because it's very drought resistant. You know, there's a lot of eucalyptus in Israel, I believe, due to the drought resistance.
Well, it doesn't sound very drought resistant if it's burning.
Well, it's the unforeseen consequences. It's like when you introduce cane toads all over the place. Ever heard of cane toads?
When you introduce what?
Ever heard of cane toads?
No.
They're a toad in California. Oh, sorry, not in California, in Hawaii, that they brought to Australia to eat bugs. And the cane toads turned out to be bigger pests than the bugs. They're spreading all over Australia.
You know, I live on Long Island, and we've always, ever since I can remember, we've always had frogs. And you never see a frog anymore.
Well, they say frogs are very sensitive to the wrong sort of chemicals in the environment.
Well, of course, that's killed them off. And then I remember I hadn't seen one for years, and then one day I saw one in my yard, and I was so happy. And whatever happened to him, I don't know, but I never saw a frog again.
Well, a lot of people use the herbicides like Roundtree. They're blaming for it. I don't know how true it is.
Well, you know, whatever they're using, they do use herbicides, and they screw up the ecology. Because then we started to get a really big
getting back to forest fires, one of the reasons it seems they stopped doing burn-offs is because of carbon credits. If you do a burn-off, you have to add the amount of carbon credits. You've emitted so much carbon. And that goes on.
But I don't think they're doing that. That's not what's happening in California. They're not purposely doing those fires.
I never said they were. I said they used to do burn-offs in the past in a lot of places to burn all the litter on the ground. They would do it in winter, or, you know, a time of year when there was the least chance of the fire spreading.
Where is this, in Australia?
I think you'd find it would be the case in California as well. Now, look, the natives used to do burn-offs. The Indians used to do burn-offs. The Australian Aborigines used to do burn-offs.
I don't know about the Indians, but I know that now.
No, the Indians definitely, the American Indians definitely did burn-offs.
Not now, not with people that have million-dollar homes. They don't want their homes burnt down.
No, we're talking about when the American Indians roamed the plains a long time ago.
Well, I don't know anything about that. That I don't know.
Okay.
You know, there's no written history because there was nobody out west way back then.
Okay. Okay, so Friedrich Nietzsche's The Madman, very short piece, but really the foundational piece, I think, truly the foundational piece for existentialism. The existential project, such as it is, such as we can understand it, really does start with this piece. This is the first understanding. And the reason for that is because the people who generally get lumped in as the existentialist school, if you take an existentialist class or if you read an existentialist textbook, the authors in the class that you will study and the authors covered in the textbook will be Nietzsche, will be Kierkegaard, will be Hegel, will be Heidegger, will be
Sartre.
Sartre, yes, but Marx in his way. Now, these writers were 19th century writers. Mary, that was the reason why I didn't include Sartre, because he was a 20th century writer. But the point I was trying to get to was that these were all 19th century writers.
Okay.
Now, these 19th century writers are writing, all over the 19th century, early, middle, and late 19th century. Now, at the time that they were writing was an incredible revolution in every part of society, specifically in Europe, but really all over the world. Revolutions in spirituality, revolutions in science, in technology, in economics and business and political nation state life. Our concepts of all of these great institutions were being overthrown and being reconsidered, reconceived in different ways. Certainly with the advent of Charles Darwin, with evolution and understanding of what a human is, understanding of what an organism is, and our understanding of meaning and purpose and life and everything that humans should be and believe. These were the traditional coordinates that we oriented ourselves according to. Ourselves as a family member, as a husband, as a citizen, as a as a taxpayer, as a German or as a Belgian or whatever. Our identity and how we act, how we should behave towards one another, ethics, morals, our activities, figure out who we are as individuals and as collectives, where we're going, what our goals, what our destination is supposed to be, what we're up to. So this all is being upended one by one. Every one of these institutions, the family, the political, the nation state, the economy, religion, all of this is in chaos. It's tumultuous. So the things that bind us together and tell us who we are in trouble.
Yes.
The meaning systems we have. So when you call these into question one after the other, call them into question, screw them up and mess them up, overturn them, you have to have something that you're going to replace them with. And what these philosophers that we're talking about, Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Marx, etc., Hegel, is they're putting an eye onto that, and we can roughly call it the modern project, the project of modernity itself, the modern era. What are we replacing these grand institutions with? The institutions of the family, the institutions of our our sexual identity, our ethical identity, our
Let's hear it for the aristocracy, please.
that one as well.
The master morality, please. Don't forget it.
A little lacking in it, wouldn't you say?
If you're going to kick out every one of these pillars, and these were the pillars that held up society, that we were being suspended on, and if you get rid of them one by one, take out those cables that are holding us up,
Yeah.
what do you replace them with? What do you end up with for replacements to hold up the modern era?
Well, right now, what we're replacing them with is, you know, computers and AI, and it's not a good thing, I don't think.
So what these writers and thinkers were pointing out were, we are coming up with replacement institutions. So are they, how do they work? How are they working? Are they doing the job that they're intended to do? And I think what they have looked at reveals that these replacement institutions are substandard, are inferior. They're not doing the job in quite the way that they were intended to. And there's going to be consequences of
Yes,
that.
bad ones.
And I think the world that we're living in today is exactly the world that they foresaw. Nietzsche certainly.
You think they foresaw this technological, you know, era with computers and stuff? Did they foresee this? They just saw bad things coming.
Certainly they did see a technological revolution, and certainly all the way from the beginning of the age of the Industrial Revolution, the age of the scientific enlightenment. Technology was certainly just taking off over the course of the last century.
What year did George Orwell write 1984 and Brave New World? What that was 20th century, right, David?
Yes.
Certainly at that point, they saw the age of computers and high technology, right? And don't you think? But we're talking about 18th
I don't know if they saw that, but they didn't see good things coming. I know that.
Yeah.
Because
so sorry, David, but it was not during the 18th century that they first saw the age of computers and AI and all that. Yeah.
I don't know when. I mean, I only started to become aware of computers or the internet, let's put it that way, I think in the early 90s, when I started getting on board with that. But in the beginning, I think we all thought it was fun. We didn't foresee.
Well, I think I was in high school when I read 1984, and I was so naive. I thought that when 1984 came, that we would be living in the kind of world that the book was about, and I was kind of freaking out. And oh no, 1984 is just around the corner. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And then nothing happened. So I thought, okay, we survived 1984. That's how.
Yes, but well, dropping my phone here. It's starting now to become like 1984.
I think we're already in it, or maybe even, don't you think, to a certain degree, we are in it?
Yes, I think so. Very, very scary.
So these great institutions that we traditionally conceived as essential for humanity, traditions like religion, like the family, like our concept of the economy, our concepts of science and technology. When these things are missing from a society, then that causes some consequences in terms of our morals, our ethics, our social standing. Even when they're there, they're not functioning the same way. They've dropped out. And they've dropped out in a very radical way, in a deep way. So when you read The Madman, first of all, the idea is that he is holding a lantern in the middle of the day. You see, any ideas from anybody on what that might be about? It's the middle of the day, and he's holding up a lantern to light things. Can anybody give me any idea on that one? Why would he be holding a lantern in the middle of the day?
Well, lanterns sort of represent light and vision and,
Okay.
right? Light, vision.
Okay.
What lantern represent? Something you
Well,
can
it's
see.
tracing back to Diogenes.
Well, that's
possibly.
correct. Yes, clearly Nietzsche is playing off of the Diogenes legend.
Right, I mean, you've got a beauty there. I mean, you could be a barbarian. You could go to Greece, hear the story, and then you're an old man back in your barbarian village, and you think, aha, where's the torch? Run up one street, run up the other. Everyone starts following you. And I go, well, what are you looking for? People. And they say, well, there's plenty of people around here. And then you say, no, I'm looking for real people.
Yeah, in both of those cases, yes, you're making a rhetorical point to get people to come to an understanding. If the madman is holding a lantern in the middle of the day where the sun is shining and you don't need a lantern, the point he's trying to make is there is something that you're not seeing. There's something that is right clearly evident in front of you, and nevertheless everyone seems to be blind to it.
Or he may also be saying what the rest of the society would consider a madman truly maybe is the visionary. Could be a visionary. Somebody who is considered madman. Maybe he sees and knows more than your ordinary people who are considered not mad, perhaps. So just because the society calls a madman, I don't know. I mean, it's definition of madman can be very questionable, so to speak.
Yeah, we can certainly wonder why is he called the madman? Why would he be considered a madman for pointing out what he's pointing out? There's a lot of different ways to slice this very short piece. It's only five paragraphs.
Or madman could be considered a madman because he doesn't follow the herd in the way he thinks and lives and behaves, so yeah.
I thought he was gone mad because he recognized the collapse of existing institutions.
Possibly. So he's trying to point out, certainly, that there's something that people need to see and they're not seeing. So that's one thing he's saying. He's saying, even though it's bright daytime, Nevertheless, there's something that requires illumination, that requires light shown onto it. So he points out, the first thing he says is that I seek God. Where is God? And then he goes on to say, we have killed him, you and I. We're his murderers. We've killed God. So this is.
I hope we didn't.
So this is, anybody who reads Nietzsche realizes this is certainly one of the most famous things of Nietzsche. And
Yes.
I would always say, whenever anybody brings up Nietzsche, they always say, oh yeah, he said God is dead.
Right.
So when you read this piece, you realize actually Friedrich Nietzsche himself never said God is dead. This was the character of the madman who said God is dead. One wants to point that out. This fictional character of the madman actually said, we've killed God.
But Nietzsche said that. Didn't Nietzsche say that we're the ones that are killing off God?
Well, the point, that is one of the points in this piece, is the assertion that we have killed God, society, civilization, all of us. And I think he was specifically saying Europeans, but really everyone in the modern era.
Not everyone. Plenty of people still believe in God.
So what does he? So what would that mean?
What would God mean? What are you asking? What would mean?
What would that mean? What would we have?
Well, could it be possible that the madman's concept of God may be quite different from your average citizen's concept of what God is also?
Okay. Okay, you could pin down a hard and fast definition of what he meant by God.
Yeah.
In fact, that's, I think, key to understanding this. Certainly, by doing that, you would have to, wouldn't you? Wow. What does it?
And madman may be holding the lamp in the daylight, kind of saying, I see the truth. I see God, and you have killed God, and so I know the truth. I know the real God, and that you have killed. Madman is saying, I know the truth.
Yeah, I think you come to directly the important thing there is to understanding this passage, to understanding the parable, which is, what does he mean when he says the word God? What does anybody mean? Well, specifically, what does he mean here? What does he mean if he says the word God? Any ideas? So God is dead. Okay, what exactly?
Does he mean the creator?
Is this, yes, exactly. Okay, question. Is he the creator of the universe? He's talking about what? That guy that's on the cloud with the beard, that image in the Sistine Chapel, creating Adam. I mean, is that specifically what he's talking about? The creator of the universe, the creator of Adam and Eve, creator of the Garden of Eden, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe, possibly.
What do you think he means, that we're killing off ourselves? You think he means we're killing off ourselves?
Well, let's go ahead with it.
So could he be talking about the...
Yeah, let's go ahead with it. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran to the marketplace, and cried incessantly, I seek God, I seek God. As many of those who did not believe in God were standing around just then, he provoked much laughter. Has he got lost? Asked one. Did he lose his way like a child? Asked another. Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage, immigrated? Thus they yelled and laughed. Madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his eyes. "Whither is God?" he cried. "I will tell you. We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon?" Yeah, I'm going to start this over again. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his eyes. "Whither is God?" he cried. "I will tell you, we have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually? Backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there still any up or down? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is not night continually closing in on us? Do we not need light to light lanterns in the morning? Do we hear nothing as yet of the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we smell nothing as yet of the divine decomposition? Gods too decompose. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? There has never been a greater deed, and whoever is born after us, for the sake of this deed, he will belong to a higher history than all history hitherto. All right, I'll stop on that one. But okay, well, what comes to mind on those paragraphs?
Well, he's one paragraph is dealing with the objective situation, and the following paragraph is dealing with subjective concerns, like, punishing myself. First paragraph, what the hell's going on? We lost our orientation. Our planet is spinning out of control, which it isn't. So he's taken this subjective idea of God as it was perceived as an objective force in the universe. Now the planet's spinning out of control, which it isn't, but subjectively we feel the planet is spinning out of control. So this this contrast between subject and object is something that comes much more strongly to mind following Heidegger and Nietzsche and all that.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So that really does hinge on what this God thing that he's talking about actually is. Yeah, is it a subjective understanding of God, or is there actually an objective thing we're calling God that he's talking about? Which one of those two?
I think that the objective thing it's not the question of whether there's a God or not. It's the objective thing is that he's calling out the death of Christendom.
Okay.
The West itself.
Okay. So he's using God, the word God, as a synecdoche to substitute for a larger issue. So when he says God is dead, yeah, God in this case represents the larger issue of the larger understanding and orientations and our traditional coordinates of citizenship and economics and the nation states and religions and our understanding of mankind and understanding of humans, how we are relating to one another and how we exist. All of those coordinates and institutions that we formerly believed in, now all of those are in the modern project being overturned. So that's basically what he's trying to get at. By saying God is dead, he's saying, yeah, all of these things that traditionally we believed in, traditionally we understood as just givens for what humans are and how they live to one another, are dropping out one by one. Religion, so religion, meaning, purpose, you know, these things are being questioned and effectively being dispensed with, being discarded. So yes, God is dead. By that he means meaning is dead, purpose is dead, fulfillment is dead. Our concepts of humanity are being revolutionized.
What was that word you used? Synecdoche?
Synecdoche.
All right. Could you write that down for me, please?
I can, yeah. Synecdoche. It's a figure of speech in which a part is made to represent the whole.
Oh, that'd be your favourite actor again, playing that part in Blackadder. What was it? Whose dictionary was it? He was playing the part of the guy that was inventing the dictionary.
Right. Yeah. Robbie Coltrane. Yeah.
Yeah. Who was he portraying now in Blackadder?
Now these sentences that he writes in these paragraphs, you know, how do we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? Think about that. Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? We unchained this earth from its sun. How could we drink up the sea? I mean, you know, if you can expand your mind to this, and, you know, you've seen the ocean, you've seen the sea. How can you drink that up? How can you unchain the earth from its sun? He's using the largest possible scale that he can conjure in your mind, and using the harshest possible language to do so. He's trying to get you to expand your mind, to embrace the enormity of what has happened. He's trying to convey the monumental event of this. I mean, not just the death of God, but the death of the upending of every possible institution and consideration that we have had traditionally for centuries, for generations. This is a monumental project. And if you were to really sit down and give your mind the appropriate context of all this, you would realize the grandness of this, the enormity of this. It would be the equivalent of drying up the ocean or unchaining a planet from its orbit. It should, if you really thought about it, chill you. It should be a very chilling contemplation. You should feel it as deeply as he's trying to make you feel it. You should be, what would life be like without a sun that we're orbiting around, without an orientation, as he puts it? Is there any way up or down? Are we not straying through an infinite nothing? Are we plunging continually backward, forward, in all directions? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? The idea that, you know, up, down, right, wrong, back, forward, all of these ways of doing. If you get rid of them, which we have done in the modern project, there should be that core existential crisis of, okay, well, now what? Where do we live? Where do we act? How do we behave? If every one of those concepts have been overturned, then you have several choices to make. What do we replace that with?
What kind of choices do you think we have?
One way or another, that is essentially what the modern condition is asking and is trying to provide answers to.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, with computers and the internet and artificial intelligence and, talk of artificial intelligence being planted into our brains. And we know that artificial intelligence has no morality, and we don't know if we can transplant morality into artificial intelligence. It doesn't seem like that. So the human species will, little by little, just become a machine, and we'll be gone. We'll be extinct.
Dave, can I insert something?
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking that when Nietzsche was writing, they were experiencing the loss. But none of us have ever grown up with the certainty. So we're in an entirely different position. We don't experience it as a loss. We experience it as confusion. And so what Nietzsche was talking about was something quite different than what we're faced with today.
But he was setting the platform. He was setting the idea. I mean, he wasn't talking about artificial intelligence, but he was talking about us losing our. I think that the main purpose is love, is the bottom line. Love for each other and the planet and things like that. And somehow we've lost our way.
So Nietzsche uses the metaphor of the sun a lot. One of his books is The Dawn. He talks about the twilight of idols. So he uses the sun as a metaphor for the center. Like in the subtitle to The Twilight of the Idols was How to Philosophize with a Hammer. So he's not talking about necessarily losing something. He's talking about questioning the underpinnings of everything. Don't take anything for granted. Like, just assume it's wrong from the outgo, destroy it. And I don't think he's talking about, I think his whole thing is that when we disorient ourselves, when we question everything, especially morality, because that's the big thing that a lot of philosophers, and that's one of his complaints against them, is they criticize everything except morality. Like, look at Kant, So he questions even that. And what he says is when you disorient yourself, you go off into the distance, it's such a great deed. You experience nihilism, the nothingness, the outer space, psychologically speaking, of drifting away from your sun now that you're not tethered to any kind of core meaning anymore. And he, I think, says that the cure for this is to say yes to it, to become one of these things that loves the adventure of being uprooted from, what you've questioned. Like, he talks about we've cut our umbilical cord, like, to life and everything, in a sense, and we suffer nihilism from not taking these things for granted anymore. And I guess what he says is what's left over is basically a kind of power of rank based on how much you say yes to this. If you can say yes to it, he uses the eternal recurrence as like a framework for saying, you know what, it's always going to be this way. There's always going to be something next you can question. I mean, I don't know. I just don't think it's limited to his time, the way Heron was saying. You know, we have our own morality. We're like secular humanism. You know, there's all kinds of confusing things people are victims to these days. And no, I think his main morality is, or his main criticism is of morality, and that we don't need it. That if you can say yes to not necessarily being a good person, being detached from any orientation like that, you're free. You're free from the herd, from slave morality, from, you know, being mediocre. You're thinking for yourself. And I think what he says in the story of the madman, it's a parable of Diogenes walking around with a lamp during the middle of the day saying, has anyone seen a human? Has anyone seen a human? I don't see any humans around. So what he's really saying.
So he was looking, Diogenes was looking for an honest man.
I've heard it human. I guess I remembered it wrong. But either way, the parable.
But as it turns out, Diogenes was not so honest himself. So there's the paradox.
Well, he lived like a dog.
You know, does that exist?
So I think the thing is that he's just saying that we're the new gods. We have to be the sun for ourselves. When he's saying, looking around, like, where is God? What's happened to God? You've killed him. Saying what we've done is worthy of something gods do. That's in the parable of the madman. So we're the new makers of our own meaning now. We're free to make our own meaning. So we've got to cross this abyss of nihilism to find the new center in ourselves. So, I mean, he doesn't say.
Well, when you talk about freedom, you've heard that phrase that freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose.
That's, you know, that's in a song. I've heard that definition. Yeah, well, I think just the thing is he's not describing it as like a loss. He philosophizes with a hammer. We are the ones that killed God. We're the ones that are doing this destructive act if we're really questioning all things. So it's like something we should be proud of. We're the destroyers. We're the conquerors of this new unknown.
We should be proud of that? You think we should be proud of that?
I mean, that was my word. I don't know if he uses the word proud, but
do you think we should be proud of that?
I think if you think for yourself and don't just listen to what the herd tells you is good and moral because they say so, is something you should be very proud of. It's worthy of gods.
I think there needs to be a balance. No man is an island.
Well, you know, I'm just going along with my personal gleanings from Nietzsche, in particular with this parable of the madman, you know.
Okay.
But you know, some people think that there needs to be balance. I don't think Nietzsche's using the word balance very much. I think he's saying, listen, it's too late. We've killed our center of meaning. We have to do it.
Okay, so then what? There's no more discussion.
Well, I mean, you can discuss it. So like I shared with David and Stephen like a week or so ago, one of my favorite, it's in The Will to Power in Walter Kaufman's translation. And he talks about his endeavor is to oppose decay and increasing weakness of personality, and that he sought a new center. This is in 417. It's like halfway through his aphorism. And he said that he realized this was impossible. You know, thereupon he advanced down the road of disintegration, where he found new sources of strength for individuals. We have to be destroyers.
Yeah, and then he went crazy.
Well, there's a lot of evidence to say that was some organic thing. He had brain damage, or
He
got-
had syphilis.
Yeah.
There's no evidence he had syphilis.
Well, there's different narratives. Some say that they came up with the syphilis narrative to discredit him, to make him look like.
Generally, it's believed he might have had a brain tumor of some type, maybe a benign one, or maybe one that got a bit out of whack.
Well, it doesn't make any difference whether it's syphilis or something else. It's not about the morality of it. He had an organic brain dysfunction.
Well, there's something to be said about the possibility. There's also the narrative that he lived his philosophy, and that led him to a certain kind of insanity. But I think there was some kind of organic brain.
I think you've all completely missed the point of the Madman. He's copying the work of another famous existential philosopher. Nietzsche did a lot of copying. And I can tell you, it's one of the most famous books in the history of literature. And you guys don't seem to be able to work it out. It's quite simple. He's in the story of the Madman. He's drawing on the work of a famous author who would be regarded as an existentialist.
David, I'm trying to get my video back on, and it says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. Did you do something? Did you do something to the video?
Is that fixed?
The host has asked to start the video. Okay, all right.
Okay.
You cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. Oh, so I don't know.
I see you now. I see you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, nobody can guess what the book is.
No.
One of the most famous books in literature.
Are you talking about Faust?
Well, that's a very famous work, but no, something more contemporary with Nietzsche. Nietzsche possibly borrowed a lot from other people and didn't admit what he was borrowing.
But I think all philosophers borrow from each other. And
that's besides the point. What is the work?
Just spoil it.
One of the most famous pieces of literature from the 19th century. Sorry?
Why don't you just go ahead and tell us?
Yeah, tell us.
Well, what is often God to people? What does God mean to most people?
Tell us.
Well, what would the traditional picture of God be to you?
I think most people find it to be like a father figure.
Brilliant. Full marks. So in which famous novel, very long novel, do the children kill the father?
Isn't that Titus?
19th century novel, one of the most famous 19th century authors, writes a book and where the children murder the father. Well, actually only one of the children does. The brothers Karamazov.
No. Okay.
So I would say Nietzsche would have to be aware of the fact that in bringing out the concept of killing God, we are also killing the Father. Now, there's an important aspect to religion, is that it creates a sociability amongst people. It doesn't matter if the religion is based on the premise which is false. It creates a sociability because we all have one Father. We are all brothers and sisters of the one Father. So that created in society, it drew on the familiar instinct towards every other human being at some level. Does that make sense?
I think that's what Nietzsche would call the herd morality that we're leaving behind by killing God. Like, I don't think that's what he's advocating. I think
hang on now. That
Well, he talks about slave morality.
You're
nationalism.
assuming that Nietzsche rejected all of his pejoratives. That when there was a quality there which we assume he object to, he's saying it's complete nonsense. Whack off from it. No, he's saying they're real. He's saying the slave morality is real.
Yeah, well,
It works
he's saying you need
as well as the master morality.
He says you need a wide base. The higher the type, the wider the base you need. He says you need to encourage mediocrity so that you can have more of lesser types to compare yourself to.
Yeah, that's Blackadder. Yeah, when he's comparing himself to Sir Percy when he's having breakfast.
So I'm just saying, he's saying if you are going to be one of these Ubermenches, that you have to cross an abyss of nihilism, being disoriented, and eventually own the fact that you're on your own, that it's up to you, that you're.
And then you become a James Bond villain. Okay.
Eventually, yes. Eventually you come to that point. But clearly the idea is that disorientation, as you say, is the beginning of this process. That kind of a vertigo, where it's just, oh no, what now? Where do I go? How do I think? What do I do? Because that point of vertigo, that point of disorientation, is where thought begins. That's where thinking begins. You're not going to question if you're just feeling comfortable. You're not going to start thinking and question your circumstances if everything's going smoothly. It's when things have been disrupted that you start to question and you start to think and you start to consider and start to conceive of new options. So he does want to bring you towards that point of disruption.
But are we going to allow madmen to wander the street who are in this condition? Or should we lock them up again?
So I was looking for this passage that I couldn't find for the love of me last time we spoke, David. I found it. It's 405 of The Will to Power. And so to what an extent the self-destruction of morality is still a part of its own force. We Europeans have in us the blood of those who died for their faith. We have taken morality to be serious and awesome, and there is nothing that we have not in some way sacrificed to it. On the other hand, our spiritual subtlety has essentially been attained through conscience vivisection. We do not yet know the whither toward which we are driven once we have detached ourselves from our old soil. But it was from this same soil that we acquired the force which now drives us forth into the distance, into adventures, thrusting us into the boundless, the untried, the undiscovered. We have no choice left. We have to be conquerors once we no longer have any country in which we are at home, in which we would want to preserve things. A concealed yes drives us that is stronger than all our no's. Our strength itself will no longer endure us in the old decaying soil. We venture away, we venture ourselves. The world is still rich and undiscovered, and even to perish is better than to become half-hearted and poisonous. Our strength itself drives us to sea, and where all suns have hitherto gone down, we know of a new world. So that was last time we talked about the Madman. That was the passage that I was thinking of that I couldn't find. And he uses the metaphor of the sun, you know, of where all suns have hitherto gone down. We're going.
Okay, which passage is that?
405.
405 in
Will to Power. Walter Kaufman's translation. I don't know if they're numbered differently in others, but I just thought those were really relevant to the discussion because he's saying it's an adventure. We're going out to sea towards the horizon where the sun sets, where all suns have set, where all meaning has been lost before. Whatever is going to come next, that's going to go down the same way, but we know there's something new. We know of an undiscovered country, and it's ours. We can own it. So I think he's celebrating that, yeah, it's disorienting. That's what it's like being on your own. You're not, I use the term umbilical cord. It could be any parental figure, you know. Yeah, fatherly, but you're not under the shadow of protection. You're not under the same morality as the herd anymore. You're on.
So are you one of the 97 out of 100 turtles, baby turtles, scampering along the beach, have cut their umbilical cord from the egg and have scampering, trying to make it to the water while the seagulls are picking you up? Are you one of the ones that gets munched up by the seagulls?
I don't know if that metaphor applies. I think, it's. I think I'm more of a seagull than a turtle, but yeah, I think.
Well, you're more closely related to the turtle than the seagull. Mammals are. They came from the line that produced the turtle. So I'd say get in contact with your inner turtle.
I mean, I think we all have an inner turtle. I mean, we all go into our shells when we feel attacked or threatened. So, I don't want to be put in the box of a turtle, but no, I feel like he's saying it's not for everyone. His philosophy is not for everyone. He says, he said somewhere, and I think maybe Beyond Good and Evil or something, how does a God philosophize? It's not for everyone. Some people need to live in the comfort of their idols. He's one that smashed his,
Your name, Christopher, I have to do this because I've always been very fond of A.A. Milne's stories. Is Christopher Robin because
it's my name? It's my first and middle name.
Oh, it's your first and middle name. Okay. It's a good name. It's a famous name.
Thanks. It's done me well. I use my first and middle name instead of just Chris. It's easier to remember.
Yeah. Well, totally easy to remember. Yeah. And then maybe put a little dash Winnie the Pooh or something.
I'll think about it.
Sorry, I went off on tangent. Sorry about that.
It's okay. I appreciate it. So I don't know. Anyone else have any opinions on that? So I guess, Mary, I was saying I don't think there's not any discussion going on about it. I think what he's recommending is some people have the fortitude to say yes to the void of not knowing, of just going on their own, and we're going to make mistakes and it's going to destroy us, and that's okay. You don't need to know, and whatever next idea or opinion or belief or philosophy or morality comes along next, you can destroy that one too. There's always something more. So he's just saying, get into it, become destroyers, conquerors, think for yourself, question.
Well, I'm an artist, so I consider myself a creative person, not a destroyer.
Well, creation includes destruction. The raw materials you use in creating something are ruined from their original, states.
I think I'm kind of losing what the point is. Like, where are we going? What are we talking about? What are we trying to say?
The Madman, and I was just, I don't know, contributing and trying to finish off a little. I guess I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that Nietzsche was saying that. I think it's important that the character was a madman and not necessarily a sane person walking around being.
So you feel no aspect of tragedy in murdering your father? Meaningless to you?
Well, I think it's necessary. It's like you
never had a father.
I've got one. He's cooking in the other room right now. So no.
What's he making?
That's nothing to do with anything, please. Let's keep on with the subject.
Pork loin. So, anyways, no, look, there's like birth is like a violent thing. It's bloody. It's to be alive, you have to. So many more life forms, even if they don't have a nervous system, have to die for you to sustain yourself.
But you're still living in the paternal home.
Well, technically, my mother runs the household, but yeah, I live with the parental units. Thanks for rubbing that in. Appreciate it. Was it No, well, look, I'm just saying you like it's the story of Osiris and Horus. You know, he had to be killed and reborn through his son, and you know, there's a yada yada. Joseph Campbell, lots of other metaphors that you gotta like Oedipus. You know, there's all kinds of father killing going on. It's a metaphor. You know, it's like Tiamat and yeah, Marduk. You know, Marduk had to kill the dragon, you know, to be to use the pieces of it to make the new world out of it. Odin did the same thing. What is it? Zeus killed his dad. You know what I mean? There's a theomachy going on when you step into your own. If you're gonna
well, Odin killed the with his two brothers, killed the giant Ymir, I think his name was.
Yeah.
Yeah, made the world out of his body. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's that was all the myths think about each other. So, you know, there's whether it's a giant, a dragon, the father, you know, it's the authority figure, the morality, God, you know,
Right.
the sun that we're attached to, that we orbit around. We're detached from once we've killed him with our hammers, you know, in the twilight of the idols.
Well, anyway, but
Right.
even by Nietzsche's time, even the 18th century, European Western culture had become quite sophisticated, and one of its foundation stones was the religion. You know, if we were to go back to the 18th century, most would still profess a belief in God. Even, you know, I mean, among the people that mattered, the people at the top of society. And the 18th century civilization was quite sophisticated, and yet it still believed in the great invisible one.
So what are you getting at? Oh, well, no, well, he was lucky enough to get the upgrade. You know what I mean? He exposed himself and had the fortitude to question all things. I mean, I think it's related to him. He read Darwin. I think it's really related to that. When he read Darwin, he said, "Can this be true? Is this guy up to something? Why is he trying to ruin all meaning for us? Like, if this is true, it means we're just a monkey. You know what?"
Yeah, well, that's a tragedy for me every day when I realise that I'm surrounded by monkeys.
Yeah, well,
And I'm one too. It's a
well,
tragedy.
well, I guess just like
My real image of the human being has been lost due to Darwin, that I thought they were real human beings, and now all I see are mad apes. All I see are monkeys, you know. And I realise they're limited as monkeys. They can only go so far.
yeah, well, I think different people have different upgrades, different centers. Like, so you're familiar with Stirner. He said that it isn't just God. There's the state. There's man, or we would call it humanity these days. Humanism's like a religion. You know, nationalism for patriots is they've got religious zeal about it. You know, so it doesn't have to be God. It's what Stirner would call a spook. He's just talking about the biggest, longest enduring one in Western civilization, God. You know, the big monotheistic God. I think it does. It you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be God. It's the spook. It's the system of spooks.
So you never believed in God, did you, Chris?
Well, technically I do. I mean, I think there's by definition, like it depends on how you define it. My God is omnipresent and omnipotent, so he's everywhere and in everything. So I don't know. It's the only thing. So it's just a word for everything. It's so to me, it's not a matter of belief. It's just that's how I use the word. But
Well,
yeah.
you're either a pneumatist or a pantheist then.
Well, so I'm a lot like Nietzsche. I don't, but I don't need an eternal recurrence. No, I believe in a God. He's just omnibenevolent and omni-malevolent. So I don't have a problem of evil, and I do try to be godlike. which I think is what an Ubermensch tries to do. So
You're just a monkey, Chris. You're not a god.
well, I think some monkeys can try harder at focusing on the thing that the entire universe has in common and acquire some of its attributes, and it make them favored in their own eyes.
We're monkeys with fire. We used to sit around the campfire on many evenings and finding each other more interesting than we normally do now, because we were sitting around campfires looking at each other for a long time.
Did Nietzsche actually read Darwin?
Yeah.
Apparently, yes.
I'm not sure about it, but I've just read that he most likely did not.
No, he read it. It's in
Okay.
I don't have that page dog-eared. No, well, he's got a quote. He said something about it. It was one that struck me, because he was saying he was pleading, like, can they be serious? Like, I hope they're really trying to be honest. I hope they're really trying to be honest with integrity in like further science, because if they're not, these are just assholes trying to say we're monkeys. So he read it. He just didn't want to believe it. And I think it was one of the bigger things. I think he was trying to question all things. I think Kant thought he was doing that, but didn't want to give up morality. That's why he kept people are ends in themselves, and humanism's basically, I don't know, Kantianism in my mind, but I'm oversimplifying things, I'm sure. So he actually wanted to question.
He could have been familiar with the ideas and not actually read Darwin himself.
I think he was interested in questioning everything, including and especially morality. But I think the concept of natural selection that Darwin came along with really helped nudge that. Here's an alternative. Here's something that says we're monkeys, instead of just being an atheist or a devil worshiper or something. Like here's something new. It's different. It's scientific. It's becoming popular. This will ruin meaning for people who believe in it, which a lot of people who believe in evolution would say, you don't need a god. There's natural selection and whatever, So, yeah, I don't know. That's why it's hard for me to define my God, because my God is the one that the atheists believe in. He's the one behind natural selection, and he's just a metaphor. I don't think it thinks for itself. You can say he's an asshole, and that doesn't mean I'm going to go to heaven or hell or anything.
So you believe in the blind force of nature?
I think that it lives through us, so it's not completely blind, but we're monkeys. So like it's doing monkey stuff in us. It's doing cat stuff in cats. It's doing air stuff in air. I don't know. It's if I were you, I'd be doing what you're doing. So.
I think that Nietzsche and Darwin line up really, really well.
Well, I think Nietzsche was a poet,
Yeah.
and I think he liked having his own like brand.
Yeah.
He was really. I think he's a great philosopher, but he was really proud of himself. He does himself a lot of like, my philosophy is like, leaping over mountains, and I'm crushing stars, and like, he's a bit grandiose about it, but that's what's great about it. He was invigorating.
I'll have to tell you about my feeling. Actually, my feeling is this: I can feel with Nietzsche. For me, the loss of a spiritual culture is a tragedy. It's a tragedy in almost every aspect of life. For me, it's a tragedy.
I think Nietzsche would say something similar, but that it's a necessary tragedy if you're going to overcome your original condition, if you're going to be more than just a man or human.
Well, you might be deluded in the idea of your I that overcomes anything. No. Did you make a choice to be a man on Earth? Was that your decision?
No, I don't think.
Are you really you, or are you just something else's idea?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, we learn languages and we're conditioned by social factors. So, no.
Are you like a Huxley's novel, A Brave New World, when the Delta class are all really happy being Delta class, Are you one of those, or are you happy being a beta, or you're happy being an alpha, or, you know?
No,
You've
I
got
don't.
this idea that you are you and you're really pleased with the idea. And, well, maybe no. Maybe a lot of what you are was some deity's idea. And you're dumb enough to ride with it, you know?
You know, Stephen, I love hearing you talk, but I don't know. I feel like you're always trying to put me in a box, you know, like, are you this or are you that? So, like, I don't choose what I am. I don't think anyone chooses what they are, but I think we're forced into a position where we have a measure of influence over ourselves. I think if you're one of the lucky or unfortunate few that chooses to question your origins and try not to take yourself for granted, you know.
Okay, let's project one immense difficulty in life, and there's the truth. Now, not only do a great amounts of people deliberately engage in falsehood, most people, even when they pursue the truth that suits them, the truth that they like to hear. Please tell me the truth that I like to hear. And it's most people. It's tragic.
Yeah. Well, I think the tragedy with Nietzsche's Übermensch and master morality is that it's lonely at the top. I'm saying there is tragedy to it, but it's necessary if you're going to be better than other people. I mean, that just go with the flow and, you know, live the unexamined life.
Yeah, well, okay, you're optimistic about the tragedy. You're optimistic about the pessimism.
I'm saying I'm lucky that I got to a point where I could pat myself on the back for being different. And it was a tragedy. Like, I went through a lot. It was hard work. I don't know, like in Germany, you know, dueling scars were like a trophy of honor. So, like, yeah, I don't know. The tragedy and the suffering.
Oh, trophies. You've been collecting trophies, have you?
Well,
you're a Boy Scout.
So, not trophies from anyone else, but trophies according to my own set of.
You should watch the Goodies episode on where they became Boy Scouts, yeah. And the final one was world domination, the world domination badge. If David's familiar with the Goodies, an English comedy group of the 1970s.
Hey, Stephen, we've got plenty of opportunity to talk to each other. I think everyone's got something to say.
Yeah, okay. Let's go with Emily. Emily, what do you want to say?
I think the last sentences that you talked about was like this chunk of questions. Whither does it now move? Whither do we move away from all suns? That kind of like.
I can go to it if you want. This one.
Yeah. So this is the madman questioning things,
yeah.
And so I kind of. Well, I don't know if anyone else read like the lectures that you had you'd linked to, like the Google Docs ones, but I think that this is like a really interesting opportunity to think about the madman being mad because he has like lost this institution that is like what tethers us to reality and morality. And I don't know, it seems like this whole reading is about that like chaos that ensues within us when we have this like inevitable kind of explosion of like we have nothing to be tethered to. And so he's, you know, talking about, yeah, like what happens now? What do we turn to now that we have nothing?
That's right.
And my first thought was like, I thought about Faust and Freud, which is like, I know like a very cliche thing to say when talking about any German literature, but I think that the point of Faust, which is like, you have this guy who has seemingly achieved everything on earth and is still unsatisfied and is so desperate that he essentially kind of becomes this madman where he like turns to spirituality and he's like trying to conjure these spirits, and then he is like, you know, not to spoil, but obviously we kind of all know the the what happens in Faust, but he makes, you know, the deal with the devil. He's this level of desperate and mad to be tethered to something and to have some direction in his life. And
Yes.
what he eventually finds throughout the book is that, which Freud eventually talked about, which is that there's this anxiety within all of us because there's this unattainable, unconquerable ontological gap in reality where we can't fully understand or know ourselves or achieve perfect morality or any sort of, like, you know, we never get it. And so people, it seems like, you know, in the Madman, it's like he's talking about how people have used God and the institution of God to kind of build a bridge over that gap and to, like, ease our souls and, like, make us feel better about this anxiety that Freud and then later, you know, Lacan talk about, which is like there's an inherent lack inside all of us. And because of that, we have this deep desire to conquer it. And we use things like religion, or for some people, politics or whatever, to, like.
We're talking about culture.
Science.
Some people certainly use science, but I think science also serves as an antagonist to other people, because it's like, you know, you can't find the truth in science. It doesn't give you the truth. Science doesn't tell us everything about, like, you know, it's like one of the main struggles in humanity is that people are bad and do bad things. And in order for society to work, we have to forgive them. And that's like forgiveness and most of love is something that happens pretty far outside of science because it's pretty irrational. But I think it, like, for some people, you know, there's certainly people who seek truth through science, but
yeah,
I think that the point of most German philosophy is that you never achieve that, which is why people kind of refer to the Germans as more pessimistic. But it is kind of freeing in a way where, as like what Goethe said in Faust, is it's not achieving that gives us happiness. It's the like he used the German verb streben, which is the he uses as like this eternal free fall in which you're striving towards that which you desire. You never touch it, you can never get your arms around it, but it's like the verb of striving towards it. And so I don't even know if Nietzsche is really saying, like, I don't know, Christopher, it seemed like you were making these normative claims that Nietzsche was like, don't do the God thing, like that's for sheeple. Whereas really it's like, you can, but don't fool yourself into thinking that this will ever get you anywhere. And with the last sentence, when he or I think he says it before too, when he talks about churches being the tombs and monuments of God, it's like, he's not saying like churches are bad or that we shouldn't necessarily have them, but he's expressing their like futility.
But you did have love at one point, and you might still have it. You had the love of your parents, which was also, in this case, the love of God. God, the parent, or your parents loved you, so you had love in your life.
Yeah, you have love, but it never that's never enough. I mean, if all we needed in life was the love of our parents, then why would any of us have any other internal struggles?
So you feel that there's something missing in your life and you're still on the search.
Yeah, I feel that way. Do you not feel that way? Do you feel pretty like...
Oh, that's the fate of the animal organism.
Well,
the animal organism, if the animal organism was ever 100% satisfied, it would lay down and die. Plants have, I reckon, reincarnate as a sunflower. I want to be a sunflower in a field of sunshine and just be happy to be rooted to one place, This animal thing's really getting bad, It's
So I do think Nietzsche was very anti-Christian. That's why he had a book called The Antichrist. You know, says what is good, all that heightens the feeling of power, the will to power, power itself in man. What is bad, all that proceeds from weakness. What is happiness, the feeling that power increases, that a resistance is overcome. Not contentment, but more power. Not peace at all, but war. Not virtue, but proficiency. Virtue in the Renaissance style, not virtue, virtue free from moralic acid. The weak and ill-constituted shall perish, first principle of our philanthropy, and one shall help them to do so. What is more harmful than any vice? Active sympathy for the ill-constituted and weak. Christianity. The problem I raise here is not that what ought to succeed mankind in the sequence of species, the human being is an end, but what type of human being one ought to breed, ought to will, as more valuable, more worthy of life, more certain of the future. The more valuable type has existed often enough already, but as a lucky accident, as an exception, never as willed. He has rather been the most feared. He has hitherto been virtually the thing to be feared. And out of fear, the reverse type has been willed, bred, achieved. The domestic animal, the herd animal, the sick animal, the Christian. So I don't think he's for religion, guys. I really don't. So I hear your arguments. I mean, he says that what we're doing by killing God is worthy of God's. That yes, there's this anxiety, there's this nihilism. It's a tragedy. You know, we've killed our spiritual parent, our center, our son, but we find it anew in ourselves. That he says in that one 417 that I referenced in the chat earlier, he says that one of his innovations is that he's gotten rid of the last consolation. That there is no consolation, there is no bridging this. And by saying yes to this, to that anxiety, to this free fall, you find a new center in yourself. You get into this ever renewing destruction of, you know, we're constantly going to be groping and grasping at something, but it's all not true. So just smash it with a hammer. It's an idol. You know, you can find a center in yourself as a destroyer and as a conqueror of all of these false ideas.
Actually, Chris, I think you're one of those that's banging their head against the wall.
Like metaphorically?
Yeah.
Well, because
yeah.
I'm not banging my head against the wall. You gotta be more elaborate. So you accuse me sometimes of making grand sweeping statements, Stephen.
Actually, get back to Emily. Emily, so what was the main point? I'm sorry, I probably wasn't listening too well, but what was your main point you're trying to make?
I was just like, giving you guys peace of my mind. I didn't really have anything, I didn't really necessarily have any major points I was going to make, but I will respond in terms to like, I think that although from when I've seen Nietzsche talk about Christianity, it's been him being like, this is how I feel about it. And like, he thinks objectively, it's like not true, but it's like, it of course is it's simply a infrastructure to make yourself feel better, right?
Okay, well, but when we say Nietzsche was against Christianity, which one are we talking about? Are we talking about the Nietzsche when he was a boy, which absolutely worshipped the church?
Well, not just that, but also what is God, and then you have the Spinozian God, which is kind of, it seems like what Christopher kind of subscribes to, where it's like that's a totally different thing, because people said Spinoza was an atheist and he definitely was not. And so Christianity is obviously different than just believing in God, but
I'll give you a picture. I'm a Greek shepherd, sitting on the rock. I'm in lovely Greece as we imagine it, this perfect, pristine, beautiful place with wonderful cities. Fantastic. Most scholars think that was it. That was a place to be in all time and space, was to be in ancient Greece. Or I'm there with my pan flutes, it's a beautiful, wonderful scene, but there's something lacking. I want something more. And then out of the heat of the day and the dust and the butterflies are circling around, and suddenly I look around and for a second I see magnificent Zeus, the golden god. And I think, oh, now I've had a vision of greatness to make my life complete. The wonderful God that I've always longed for. There he is, and all his magnificent Zeus. So I still long for Zeus, that beautiful picture of the golden, perfect, immaculate God, you know, and I still love God.
So I got to say this, Stephen. David brings up a good point. Every time I've heard you say Nietzsche said God is dead. Nietzsche didn't say that. Nietzsche wrote about a madman who said that. If you read carefully, I haven't ever found Nietzsche saying God is dead or that he didn't believe in God. He's, I think, referring specifically to the Christian conception of it. I
do think I can clear this.
I'm Jason Hill. Sorry, I'm coming in late. I was helping my kids with their online homework. And I think that was the topic you were talking about when I left. But I tend to disagree. Nietzsche did say God is dead in many of his texts, I think, particularly in The Joyous Science, which was not a story. That's where he first brings up the concept of God is dead. And that wasn't a story. That's him just journaling about.
Do you mean?
I do think I could clear up a little bit if you give me a minute or two. If you start things off with the Enlightenment is most commonly associated with the scientific revolution, rationality, advancing humanity. If you situate the European project inside Western European culture, at this precise moment where science is on the rise, technology is on the rise, new world views are on the rise. Now, every one of those new world views that have come on the rise and have displaced the old ones. So that is, it says it in the name, the Enlightenment, the enlightening of the world. So when the madman is, of course, presenting the lantern in the middle of the day, saying we still need light to see that what we've done. The point being, he's trying to make the point that we're not aware, even though it's the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment isn't aware of what it's actually done. The Enlightenment has effectively killed God and doesn't know it. For example, Kant is an Enlightenment philosopher. He's all about rationality, but he's all about progressive values, but he's still a theist. Kant was a theist. So the madman, let's say the madman, is saying you can't hold those two things together. You can't buy the scientific and the technological revolution and fully understand what's at stake in those and still buy into traditional religious values, at least not in the same way. That would be a misunderstanding. What Nietzsche is presenting to us is that Western European culture is unraveling from within through its own devices. So I would say, is this a critique of religion itself? I don't think it's a critique of religion itself. I do think it will be a critique of a very specific version of Christianity and the Western culture that emerges out of that religious tradition. The traditional image of God that traditionally Western European had is being displaced. The idea of God as the source of truth, the source of values, source of morals and ethics.
Well, there was a bit of a certainty there, wasn't it? Because we conceived of God as a super being who had a super intellect.
Right.
Whereas our reason, our intellect is subject to doubt. We're faced with uncertainty when we're only equipped with our own powers.
what we gave as an answer there is that religious tradition that will give us values, that will give us truth, that will give us orientation. And when you start undercutting that tradition, then the consequences of that will be profound. So when we were talking about the death of God refers to this ongoing, continuing collapse of the entire worldview, the collapse of our culture, a set of values and truths, etc. It's a slow decay, as he says in the passage. He says in the passage, I have come too early. He said then, my time is not yet. This tremendous event is still on its way, still wandering. It has not yet reached the ears of men. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars requires time. Deeds, though done, still require time to be seen and heard. This deed is still more distant from them than the most distant stars. Yet they've done it themselves. This is ongoing, and he was looking over the course of centuries that this is an ongoing slow decay, collapse. And he keeps asking the question, do you understand? Do you understand what we've done?
Right. Totally agree. I mean, my reading of it is just that he recognized the church as it was far from imperfect, but it was sort of a moral compass for humanity, and it's all we had, and we just killed it, and we have to replace it with some other moral compass of some sort. And
yeah. So to pacify Heron, I'm sure he would say, let's come to a definition of what God is, which we started with. In this passage of Nietzsche's, I would say God very definitely refers to a certain set of beliefs inherent in Judeo-Christianity, in the Judeo-Christian world.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't want to keep reading those passages, so I'll re-add them. You weren't there. I added to chat earlier 405 and 417 from Will to Power, because he answers that the new center that he found is within himself as a destroyer and as a conqueror of what will come. And I don't know.
Well, you're missing society as a whole. You're obsessed with Chris and you're neglecting the rest of humanity.
But that's what his mission is, not Chris, the Ubermensch. I've adopted my own version of that mission. So yeah, I'm talking about my understanding of it, but he's not advocating Christian morality.
Well, it's not just you on your own. It's how all of us relate in society.
When he said that he was there too soon, my impression was that he was just saying people haven't realized how dire this situation is. We've completely lost our compass. And, everybody knows that in many ways he predicted what was going to come from this. You had World War I, World War II, and that's when he should have showed up. But he was too soon, as of, whenever that was set.
I have heard the claim that he was pointing to the year 2000.
I don't think he was a prophet or could predict the future. I think anyone who's in his position.
I'm not saying he's a prophet, but he knew the shit was going to hit the fan. And he had to wait until the shit hit the fan for people to listen to a madman who said, look, God's dead. Our moral compass is gone. We got to replace it with something.
No, but he doesn't say replace it with something. He says no more consolations. We're on our own. We're detached from our original soil. Like, we'll say yes to the great wide outer space we're drifting towards now that we've detached ourselves from the sun. We're pirates now on the high seas, going for, adventures and mystery. We don't know what's going to happen.
I'm still hearing
I hear that in other readings.
I'm still
not in
hearing
that
Chris
section.
all on his own in the universe.
So you're hearing
Chris
that.
on his little island all by himself.
Look, I got to say this, Stephen. I believe in quality over quantity. And I think Nietzsche says the same thing a lot of times. If it was just me, look, I'd rather be by myself and have quality time than be surrounded by a bunch of blathering idiots, which I don't think y'all are. But if we're going to talk about that, Stephen, I'm just saying, listen,
That's called egoism.
Yeah.
Now they call it narcissism.
It's not. Nietzsche's just contemplative. And Nietzsche could be, I guess. I mean, if you're that brilliant, it would be fun to hang out with yourself.
Nietzsche's all about the ego. God, I feel like he talks about you can't do anything for yourself. No act is for you alone. Like, he doesn't use the term zero-sum game because he wasn't around. Like, that didn't come about till later.
I would say getting a bit of a grip.
Without...
I would say getting a bit of grip on the size of society, on the size of all its institutions. And oddly enough, David did bring this up. This tremendous scope, which Nietzsche somehow, he had that tremendous vision. He had that whole picture of society and all its institutions and all the people running around, and he's thinking, he's got this very, very big picture here, which I don't think I'm fully up to in any sense of the word. That he's saying that the lack of faith is bleeding through this entire picture like the molecular acid of the alien's blood.
And I think he's saying it's too late. Get into it. Like, we can't go back anymore. What can we do?
No. We're not talking about. We're talking about the vision. We're not talking about the determination.
No, in the Madman, he says, "What kind of sacred?"
You're jumping too fast, Chris. And this is the mistake that most people make. That they think if they're given an instruction, they have to follow it. No, you can just look at the instruction. The instruction could say, "Go and kill yourself." And I can contemplate that without doing it. This is a mistake. People always think, "Oh, I've been given an instruction, I must immediately go and do it." No, you don't have to. You are free to choose to be or not to be.
Do you know what I think is really interesting? Just to change this topic for a second, I mean, what about a really interesting sort of thought experiment, or maybe a paper for a student to write, would be, what would Thus Spoke Zarathustra be like in 2020? Because I feel like he could come down from the mountain on high right now. God's still dead. But what else have we killed of late? We've killed free press. We've basically allowed psychopaths to take control of the printing press. They can print money at will. The environment. I could see, the madman coming down the hill and saying,
I think
truth is over. Now what, kind of thing.
I think he'd be nauseated by secular humanism, and I also think
I'm disgusted by what's going on. I'm sure he'd be.
And I think he would think Nazism was an interesting but failed experiment at trying to live up to what he was saying.
He would have hated Nazis.
I think he wouldn't have liked a lot of it, but I think
fucking hated Nazis.
Look, I don't think you can understand Nazism without Nietzsche, regardless of how much.
Because they stole. I mean, they used him. They used his popularity as propaganda.
No, and look, Walter Kaufman's one of the best philosophers who translated his work, who did a lot to try to denazify him. And the thing is, you still can't understand Nazism without understanding Nietzsche. They misinterpreted him. Like, the whole reason he broke.
Sure, but that doesn't mean. I mean.
Look, the whole reason he broke with Wagner was because Wagner was becoming a pan-Germanic and starting his own little personality cult, hobnobbing with kings and doing other stuff. Look, he didn't like that.
So Nazism didn't have personality cults?
Well, Nazism was a personality cult. I'm saying Nietzsche wouldn't have.
He would have hated Nazism, I think. I mean, I agree with that. And
I don't think...
I also aspire to the theory that his sister, rewrote a lot of his work.
No, well, I don't think she rewrote it.
to appease the
I think
Nazis.
she edited a lot of.
Edited, yeah.
She edited a lot
Power
of
in particular.
Yeah, no, but you can also get Walter Kaufman's got a great original, of the work of what the will to power was, and he even throws in all the little footnotes of what other editions say and what parts. So I like Walter Kaufman for trying to do that, but there's still just no way of understanding Nazism without understanding Nietzsche. If he were around, he would.
But that doesn't mean that he'd like him. I mean, there's no way to understand Nazism without understanding Darwin. Darwin wasn't a Nazi.
Well, I'm just saying he would be able to see how his philosophy contributed to it.
Yeah.
There's no way to see Nazism, like it couldn't have happened without Nietzsche. If Nietzsche didn't exist, if it were Stirner, if it were Ibsen, if it were Schopenhauer, like if it were just Wagner, no, there's not enough there.
It might have not been as appealing, but it would have appealing to people. It would have still existed.
So I think people who read Nietzsche did two things. They went in two directions. Secular humanists, because they understood him saying this thing we've done that's worthy of gods, we humans are now the new gods. Whereas I think, this is my interpretation, he's talking about the individual who goes through this murdering of God. The person who does that is worthy of the title of God, in my opinion. But I think secular humanists say humanity is now the new God. And I think Stirner predicted this by saying, once you kill God, once you kill the state, once you get these spooks out of your head, you're going to be left with mankind, humanity. So I'm just, yeah. So the other direction is Nazism. If he were to make a religion for individualists, where he's talking about the Übermensch as this ultimate individual who thinks for themselves, who's detached themselves from any star, who becomes their own star, going off in the wilderness, their own destroyer and their own conqueror. That's exactly how Nazism couldn't have been formed without that ideology.
But I mean, that's just base lizard brain humanity. It's not like you need to be a Nazi. You don't need to go through these all this intellectual complex theory. Nazism's, designed by idiots. They just used Nietzsche because he was already popular. It's like, trying to use the Cardassians to sell freaking whatever the Cardassians are selling these days.
No, well, this is exactly why after he lost all meaning in things, he started developing his will to power ideas. That everything was based on this will to power. It's another version of might is right. You can say lizard brain. In his own words, he said, man is beast and super beast. The higher man is inhuman and superhuman. These belong.
Well, we don't need Nietzsche to teach us that. I mean, that was just cavemen were beating each other over the heads long before Nietzsche.
Okay, Chris, I'm tiring of this wannabe Superman. You're running around the statue of the Superman, the new idol of the Superman, throwing flower petals at it and worshipping it. It's like 25% of your time is worship of your imaginary Superman.
Well, I think that's
I'm still looking for the God that's decomposing. I like history. I want my decomposing Zeus back.
Yeah, well, there's so many dead things we could be playing with. I'm alive, you're alive. These are my thoughts. I think both of us live in our imagination much more than 25%, and everyone does, and that's called the human condition. I'm saying Nietzsche threw his own flowers at the beast.
No, I didn't say that. I said you're preoccupied with the future, your future conception, but you failed to comprehend the past, and it's going to trip you up big time.
I don't.
You think you don't need the past. You think you can just finish with it. I'm on to the Superman. You think that's where you are, but you're not.
No, well, the past is written by winners. The past is lies agreed upon. The past is what the best historians and the most popular ones who sold the most books got to say is going on. I don't know what happened. I'm only exposed to so many people. Yeah, I think there's lessons to be learned from fictions and truths, but it's all gossip about what I haven't seen with my own eyes. So,
well, let's talk about the gods. I quite like the Norse gods. I'm a bit partial to the Greek gods. So people ask me what I am, and I say I'm a bit of a Neoplatonist sort of guy. I believe in all the gods.
Well,
but I do have favourites. So I like the Norse gods, probably the most of all. So they're my most familiar gods. So what are other people's gods? What gods did they have?
Well, I was just trying to say, man, the topic of the meeting was about Nietzsche's Madman, and it's something that I think we all have personal feelings about it. We wouldn't have joined. I wasn't trying to change the subject, and I wasn't trying to talk just about me. So, I mean, I feel like it's been personally been.
So did you ever have a God, Chris?
I already told you that I do. Mine isn't dead. Mine wasn't the Christian one. The guy.
I mean, a personal God.
I mean, I don't.
God with an actual personality.
I don't personify him. I think I can. Martin.
So you're
Buber,
an atheist.
Martin
Ooh,
Buber.
No,
bad.
agnostic.
No.
He's an agnostic. He's not an atheist.
No, I'm not an agnostic. Something's really going on, and y'all are a part of it, and I call that
The
God.
definition of atheist is one who doesn't believe in a personal God.
Look,
No, the definition of atheism is someone who doesn't believe in God. Definition of agnostic is
No,
someone who
that's the
believes in God
modern
but doesn't know what it
definition.
is.
The older
Something
definition was
ineffable. It's something you can't
a person who
explain.
doesn't believe in a personal God.
Martin Buber said there's an
What does personal mean in that sentence?
Look, Martin Buber said there's an
Your father, your divine father, or your divine uncle. I'll go for uncle or auntie or mother.
So are Buddhists atheists or Taoists atheists or Hindus? Well, Hindu would be a bad example. They do have a lot of gods.
Some Buddhists believe in gods, but they just don't worship them. They're not important. They're just beings. They're not being attached to anything. So,
I wouldn't describe a
Buddhists are
Buddhist as an
seeking
atheist.
nirvana, aren't they?
so look, to answer your question, all right, I don't personify my God, but I have an I thou
Well,
relationship.
okay. Anybody else has ever had a personal God in their life?
What if you just believe in like Star Wars, the Force?
No,
Force
that's
is your
known
God,
as
and you
pneumatism.
feel like you can personally
Pneumatism is a belief that there's a divine breath that pervades the universe. So yes, that's very much the Force of Star Wars.
Okay. So would you
But it's
call
not
that person an atheist?
spiritism.
Would you call a pneumatist an atheist?
Yeah, possibly. It's a little bit of a difficult one. Spiritism is a bit different. Spiritism is that you believe in definite individual spirits. So yeah, pneumatism's a question all on its own. So okay, you're with the Force, you're with pneumatism. I'm not too sure what Chris is on about. Any other people with their gods? Bring your
I'm not. I don't.
bring
ascribe to
your
the
pet
Force.
god.
I'm probably
day.
closest to Taoism, which is very much similar to the Force.
Again,
If I
the
had to
Force.
ascribe to something, it would be Taoism for sure. But
Again, the Force.
similar
The
to
belief
the
in the
Force,
Force. Yeah.
but a little more.
This is Pet God Day, people. I want you all to bring your pet gods for display. Show me your pet god. Chris's pet god is himself. So, well, we've seen that one. You're
Where'd
the
Chris go?
Force.
Chris leave?
Perhaps, well, I just want to, because I do think the end is actually important because it does tie it all up. Where he says, it has been related further that on the same day the madman forced his way into several churches and there struck up his Requiem Aeternam Deo. Led out and called to account, he is said to always have replied nothing but, what after all are these churches now, if they are not the tombs and sepulchres of God? So he recites a requiem and declares the churches are the tombs and sepulchres of God. Now, I think there is a very clear allusion here to the mourning of this process. It's a mourning process. It's traumatic when this has happened. This is trauma. This is an attempt to overcome these traumatic movements of the death of culture, the death of tradition, and the death of our coordinates and orientation. And that is traumatic. And there is a mourning process to understand that, you know, I'm in this universe where I don't matter, where I'm just a collection of atoms pulled together, just a pattern that will be here briefly and have no impact in any larger larger sense. So that is what he's saying, is that's what's going to happen to the entire culture as the Enlightenment project, the modernity project spreads and these foundations are attacked. When what's going to replace it? There, we will come to the point where we understand we have to create new, that we've opened up the moment of potentiality where we can come up with a new answer. But clearly he's trying to get us to the understanding that we need to first understand that there's a severe traumatic impact that this is going to have on all of us.
Well, that's a funny thing, isn't it? A lot of people don't seem to have noticed the trauma. I have.
Yeah.
For me, it's traumatic. For me, it's tragic. I liked having a father God. If I could press a button and get the father God back in society, I would.
Yeah, so ultimately, if you are going to reside in that space of anxiety, that space of vertigo, that space, then you do open up potentiality. You open up the possibility to create something new. Because that's where thought begins. That's where questioning begins. So if there is a possibility for freedom, that's where it would happen. How else might we live? How else might society be constructed? What other
right now it's
could we build?
Centralization and surveillance, data-driven metrics.
There's an opening to create a new way of orienting ourselves.
I might raise the point here of Nietzsche's what were the advantages of the Christian moral hypothesis? One, it granted man an absolute value as opposed to his smallness and accidental occurrence in the flux of becoming and passing away. Two, it served the advocates of God insofar as it conceded to the world, in spite of suffering and evil, the character of perfection, including freedom. Evil appeared full of meaning. Number three, it posited that man had a knowledge of absolute values and thus adequate knowledge precisely regarding what is most important. Number four, it prevented man from despising himself as man, from taking sides against life, from despairing of knowledge. It was a means of preservation. So he's saying there that, you know, there's various elements that Christianity offered us a sense of value, that no matter how low we got, no matter how worthless in the eyes of society, we still had this God that had a place for us in its heart. Other aspects are the uncertainty of knowledge. We felt our power of reason was once God-given, and now we have this apparatus we're not too sure about. You know, is it all just pages floating in out of my mind? Have these pages really been correctly written? Are they really just rough copies, you know? Who are all the gods that are on these, you know, it's like Jungian archetypes. Who are all these Jungian archetypes rushing in and out of my brain? Are they really good pieces of work, or are they nonsense? This is all too complicated now. Before I had a God at the tiller of the boat. The God was watching over me, you know. The God was taking me to the better shore, you know. I'm now in a very complex, very uncertain world.
I often feel really jealous when, I see the, camaraderie and sort of tribal feel of a lot of the churches and community that they can build around it. And I often wish, I'm like, I wish I could believe that crap, It'd be great if I could believe, the world's 6,000 years old and I'd have friends, it'd be easy to get jobs. All that stuff sounds great, but I literally cannot. And I'm having a similar experience just watching the news these days. Like they keep telling me all these things are happening and I want to believe it, because to not believe it, leads to that anxiety that I think all of us feel, or we wouldn't be here. But I can't, like, people, and so many of my friends just say, just let it go, let it go. And I don't know how your guys' brain works, but I can't. Like, and the more you tell me to let it go, the worse it gets. So, I saw the headlines to this meetup, and I was like, that's exactly what I want to know. So, David, if you have the answers of how we're supposed to be in a situation like this, where I feel like everyone's lying to me, and that we're all sort of, the surveillance state really, it feels real right now.
This is why philosophy is dangerous, and philosophy is a very hard sell, because the first thing anybody asks when you bring up philosophy is, what's the first question they ask? They say,
why are we here again?
If I study philosophy, what am I going to get out of it? Is this going to help me? Is this going to is this going to make me happier? Is this going to help me lose weight? Is this going to make me more employable? Is this going to increase my profitability? Is this going to make me money? Am I going to gain? And what's the benefit of studying philosophy? Am I going to get a better relationship?
I know for me,
more dateable. Is this going to make me happy? There's an answer to that question. The answer to that question is no. The answer is no.
When you can find communities, no matter how small.
Philosophy will not make you happier. Philosophy is going to do the opposite of those things. Philosophy is going to make it worse for you.
But no one gets into philosophy unless they're already a little miserable. So
it's going to make
me, at least, it's just nice to feel
more uncomfortable. It's going to make your anxiety worse. It's stepping on the accelerator. It's stepping on the gas of your anxiety and your insecurity. Philosophy is the opposite of comfort and assurance.
Well, great, David. Now, so I was sold a bill of goods. You aren't going to tell me the answer? I know for me, like, I got into philosophy sort of from that anxiety. And for me, what it does give me is, at least you don't feel completely insane. You're like, oh, geniuses have been having these issues for centuries, kind of stuff, which, makes, I guess, you feel a little better. But you're right. I think these days they're trying to create the types of philosophy that might make you feel better. The Jordan Peterson crap, no offense if anyone likes it, but that guy trying to think of himself as sort of some quasi psychologist.
That is a hard.
That guy leads to Nazism, if you ask me.
That is a hard sell for people. But what philosophy is intending to do is to get you to sit inside that moment of anxiety. Sit with it, with that traumatic insecurity, that disruption. The reason for that is because that's where thinking begins. That's where questioning begins. You have to have that moment of insecurity and vertigo and disruption and disorientation in order to question, because if not, if you're just in this cotton candy bubble, you're not going to make waves. You're not going to question anything. You're too comfortable. It's when something starts poking at you that you start asking, hey, why is this way? And then you're thinking. And at that point is when you can start to begin to create something new and potentially better.
Right. But we live in this sort of cult of optimism, and especially 2020, it seems like they're really dividing the optimists and the pessimists, and any pessimism is just seen as, the Saturday Night Live skit of the wah wah kind of.
So I would say that this is not about freedom. This is not about freedom. This is about potentiality.
But I think the potentiality without sort of a greater community that accepts the pessimism of, hey, we're kind of fucked here. We really need to stop and redo things. I think we'd have a lot more potential if there was philosophical leaders in our community, and there just aren't. As far as, I mean, there's teachers and stuff, but I mean, like, like in France where you can have politicians and
So I hear
like
you mentioned the leader, the Führer.
he wasn't, well, I guess, yeah, it can go wrong. You're right. It could be worse for sure. I don't mean a singular leader necessarily, but
we've murdered the father, so we're trying to create a big brother.
Yeah.
The point I was raising, the famous novel where the sons murder the father is the brothers Karamazov. And I think that was possibly an influence on Nietzsche's Madman. The four brothers, was it? Four brothers or three brothers? Three brothers all had very differing characteristics, very different personalities. One was a dry intellectual, another one was the religious spiritualist, and the oldest brother was just the earthy man who lived with the power of his will. So spirit, mind, and body. And it was the body that murdered the father, but the other sons were complicit.
Yeah, ultimately there is no, I mean, the culture that we have created has provided us with a variety of answers. The problem is that they're insufficient. They haven't fulfilled their promise. They haven't fulfilled their potential. And the society that we're living in today, I think, without question, certainly is a very, very volatile, tumultuous time.
Well, once we were all brothers under the one God. Now that divine father is gone, who are these other people here? Are they my brother? If they're not my brother, I can throw them out of the boat, can't I? And it won't matter.
We could come up with a replacement for it, but it's not going to be of the same character that we were familiar with. We can't go backwards and return to those older traditions. We're going to have to come up with something new. That is possible, but it will
I feel like a lot of people are trying to go back to the old traditions. Jordan Peterson.
No, we are not all the same species. We're diverging. We were once one, and now we're diverging, Jafra, into completely different corridors of existence. The universe is expanding away from each other. And we're doomed to a cold, lonely place in space, Jafra. Fraja, how's that sound?
You're all.
Or we are all just meat. Frager's got their god, Homo sapiens. Okay, cool. So I pissed off Christopher and his god. I'm the destroyer of idols.
Yeah, it would be very convenient if we had a program, a project that we could point to. This is the way forward. And there are some out there, but yeah, I mean, as Mark said, false consciousness is what he said. The idea that we can try them one after the other, and they all turn out not so great. I think we live in a time that certainly requires us to take a very, very critical approach to the modern world, the modern project, our ideas of how to live and how to interact, and our ideas of the economy and the state.
Can't we just go on sleeping at the wheel?
Well,
I
have a constant sense that a new world order is being forced sort of upon us, slowly, subtly. It's coming whether we like it or not. That's where a lot of my anxiety comes from.
Is this just one world order? Is this the 101 different world orders, even down to George Soros, where everybody's got their idea? How the one world order is theirs, the 101 different people pushing for a world order. Yeah, we're going to have a great time, I'm sure.
I think the push is definitely towards centralism right now. At least, the moneyed, powerful interests, that's what they want. We went from tribalists to nations, a group of nations where a bunch of tribes could be ruled by a few people. Now they're trying to make a bunch of nations be able to be ruled by a bunch of people.
You think that the big they who are controlling your life,
there is a they. I don't know who they are. I know they're not lizards, but there is a they. There's no way all of this is happening simultaneously without some sort of coordination. In my very strong opinion, but I could be wrong. I always get frustrated.
I would say that there are a number of players.
Like that's a complete
I say there are a number of players.
A conversation stopper. There is a they. I don't know who they are.
There's a number of theys, and they're all competing with each other. There's a number of Wall Street banks.
Right now they're like, let's just consolidate our power, and we can fight after that. Is my general feeling.
Show me a bank that will lend $1 to another bank.
I'm not sure what your point there would be, but
the commercial banks will not lend a single dollar to each other. They're not in the business of helping their competitors.
That's not necessarily a they issue. And banks, the moral hazard there is just that they keep getting bailed out. They don't care. They're making loans. Everybody thinks credit's super tight. Commercial loans are as loose as ever. But they just
don't forget to click on that Fed graph. That Fed graph I've pasted there, which shows you, it's an interactive graph that shows you about every year how many, or actually every month, how many dollars were in circulation. From the $3.5 billion of 1917 to the 2.05 trillion dollars are in circulation now. You might enjoy that one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally aware of the, inflationary tendency of printing money. I think there is some potential for deflationary currencies like, the Bitcoin type things to really help.
I think gold currency. Bring back gold currency. I think I'll be happy with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Bitcoin is attempting to do the same thing as gold, just in a different way.
Yeah, I don't think these bitcoins, these computer coins, are going to work. that they have proven very unstable in value. They can transmit value very effectively, but you don't want to hold on to them because you just don't know where they're going.
I would greatly disagree. The most appreciating asset in the history of humanity is Bitcoin. So,
yeah, well, that makes it useless as money.
Well,
money to be useful has to maintain an even value. It must be a low risk for both sides of the sales equation.
I mean, there's
or it doesn't work. Bitcoin is a
currency
risk.
is susceptible to
Bitcoin is a risk
but
for
we're getting
one
way
of the
off
sides.
topic. Sorry. Sorry, David.
I'm giving everybody the 2-minute warning.
Oh, okay.
We one way or another, this room will close in 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for organizing this.
Yeah, well, thanks everybody for coming. If no one has anything else to say, but
So,
yeah.
David, give us your perspective on this session.
Does that matter?
Yes.
I try not to have an agenda. What arises, arises. I think if you try to have a designed concept of what it's going to be, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. So I never do try to have a pre-designed idea in mind. And I see sometimes, you know, I mean, it runs the gamut. It'll be very, very rigorous and academic, and sometimes it'll be very free-flowing, and sometimes it's one person lecturing, sometimes it's more of a round robin. It's just, you never know what you're going to get. It's a roll of the dice. I thought there was a lot here over the last 2 hours that I think was really good, and there was a lot I thought we could do without. But you know, I'd say that about a lot of different events that we've had over the months.
Is Meetup the best place to find this group? That's how I found out about it.
This group?
Yeah. Yeah. I just found out about it on Meetup, but no, there seems to be no other activity there.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, to answer your question, yeah, this is Meetup. This is only the Meetup group. But the difficulty you're having is this isn't just one Meetup groups. This is many, many, many Meetup groups coming together. Then that's, for example, Stephen, where are you?
Melbourne, Australia.
Southern California. Jason, where are you? You're muted.
Portland, Oregon.
Does that answer your question, Charles?
Yeah, I get it. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. So just because you don't see any activity on your group means nothing. Okay. So thanks everyone for coming, and I will consider putting again for the next Friday. Maybe I will. I think there's some threads worth mining here. So be on the lookout for the calendar for next Friday. Okay, everyone. Thanks for being here. And we got Margaret Sanger in 15 minutes, if you'd like. That'll be coming up. Okay, bye. I know you'll come to